Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Hubbard, and I'm the vendor manager for new tech at Exclusive Networks, just as it says on the screen. The objective today is really to talk through privileged identity management and also go across a little bit of privileged access management and the software and services that Lieberman software provide. I just wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping before we actually moved on. The session will last about 30 minutes. It is designed to give you a better understanding, or an overview at least, of the Lieberman solution as it stands today. And I just ask, if you want to ask questions, could you please use the chat box on the bottom right hand side of the screen, and I will hopefully be able to answer your questions on the fly. But if not, please note that my phone number and email address will be all over this, and maybe we can discuss Lieberman offline afterwards. So let's take a look at the problem. You can actually see Roy Duckle's name up there. Roy Duckles is the channel director for Lieberman software, and it might be worth sort of basically taking his name and address down, but I will actually add that at the end. The rough agenda is the problem, the solution, and about Lieberman. Very quick and precise. So let's take a look at the problem. As you may well be aware, there is a lot of sort of breach fatigue hanging around at the moment. Several new breaches are reported daily. Each day in the press we're hearing about another company that has been breached, and about intellectual property that has been stolen, and the loss of credentials and information. And I think really this is sort of painting the picture. We're in the 18 months or 2 years of the breach, or the breach era, as you like. If you'd like to know more about these type of breaches, a good place to sort of start is probably the Mandiant data breach report and the Verizon reports. They're both available online. Just Google them and I'm sure you'll find them. So a few post-breach facts. Well, of the breaches we've looked at, 100% of the victims actually had AV in place. Now, we do not advocate losing AV as part of your layered defense, but these type of solutions are becoming less and less effective against the breach we're actually seeing today. And 67 of these breaches were actually reported by third parties. Now, these parties could be you and I. So let's say we have a nice meal out in London, and a Chinese, for example, and 24 hours later we looked at our credit card statement and discovered we are now the proud owner of a 50-inch Sony TV purchased in Hong Kong. As the third party, we would then report this. 100% of breaches involve compromised credentials. Well, this is where Lieberman steps in and manages the security and the usage of privileged accounts and credentials so they cannot be compromised. And I'll explain that in a second. And the median number of days is 229. So a breach has been on the network and hasn't yet been discovered. And the average time till its discovery is 229 days. Which is actually improvement, because 12 months ago it was 430 days. So we are getting better at actually finding these things. So, how are these attacks planned and executed? Well, most attacks start in what we call a reconnaissance mode, that they scan for vulnerabilities, and quite often for default admin and vendor-based passwords. So if you've spent thousands of pounds on your periphery defenses and configure and deploy these devices to protect inbound and outbound traffic, and don't change the vendor admin password, it could easily be sort of scanned and become the entry point into your network. I'm thinking, one second. Just need to try and mute that. So the cyber thief can then escalate their privilege, start to take information out, and eventually hide their tracks and even remove themselves completely from the system. So the main part of the hack that we're talking about here requires privileged credentials, and without those, the attack cannot be successful. So the SANS Institute have put together what they call the 20 critical controls, or CSCs, that when instigated should form a strong basis to protect against the theft or compromise of your assets. Well, it just so happens that the 12th critical control deals with the misuse of administrator privileges. And this is where Lieberman plays an important part in helping organizations follow and deliver on these guidelines. By randomizing these admin passwords and therefore making it impossible for these passwords to be stolen and misused, Lieberman addresses CSC 12 actually head on. So while we're on about SANS, the CSC, Lieberman also addresses Control 16, which is account monitoring and control, by doing exactly that, monitoring the admin accounts and the network and managing them. So what's the problem with privileged accounts? So this is really quite key. The privileged accounts are absolutely everywhere, from Tim to Twitter, from a wireless access point to a mainframe. Anything that has admin rights has a privileged or administrative account. So gaining access to one of these accounts can open your infrastructure to compromise. Many organizations don't even know where their privileged accounts are and have so-called service accounts, where credentials are being shared across sometimes several admin staff. So when Lieberman does auto-discovery across the network, we find that 30% of privileged account passwords are never changed. Now, never changed is quite on 30% is quite a high percentage. So vendor passwords are still used from the day of implementation, and maybe some passwords are never set to expire, even on a regular basis. So if you consider that it does not really matter what IPS or next generation firewall or advanced threat protection tool you have in place, if you can get access to admin accounts, you can practically do what you like. And quite often, once in, these hacks remain undetected. And if you don't know they're there, how can you remediate? Just to emphasize this point, privileged user accounts can invite unauthorized use, and those accounts can be on workstation servers, network infrastructure, within applications such as Office 365, within databases like SQL or Oracle, and within service accounts not tied to an individual, for use in web services, for example. So they're typically hard to manage, and if compromised, are very difficult to remediate. And as I said, most organizations don't know where their privileged accounts actually are, and this leads to a vast unrecognized risk. So can you control audit access? Well, these admin accounts here, or these systems here, this list is actually just for Windows. If you consider IBM mainframes with OS 390, Linux, firewalls, web application firewalls, IPSs, everything has an admin account. When we run an audit on data centers, we consistently discover that 30% or more of accounts that were previously... let's start that again. When we run an audit on data centers, we consistently discover over 30% more accounts than the customer actually recognized. So does this mean that companies are really only 70% secure? Well, it's not my place to answer that, but it is a very good point. So we cannot ignore privileged accounts. 39% of IT staff have the ability to get unauthorized access to sensitive data. And these guys are trusted employees, so they need the access to do their jobs. But if all these guys know the passwords to the systems, then you have a potential vulnerability straight away. So if someone leaves the business and you've not changed their passwords, they could still have access to those systems. The 20% of IT professionals may seem quite high, but if you outsource, you give access to your provider, and if you have no auditability on this outsourcing, who knows what accounts and passwords have been shared. Quite often, when someone leaves the company, their desk will have passwords written down, and frankly, it's a simple task to use these passwords to gain access, unless you've got a policy and procedure in place to manage these credentials. The last figure is frighteningly high, but I bet it's very close to the truth. Here's a great, fairly recent example of someone who is not a hacker, but used a lack of policy and enforcement to gain access to sensitive information by persuading co-workers to give him their login credentials, using social engineering and associated excuses like, I need to get access to your system to do some maintenance. What's your password? Now, because these guys never changed their passwords and could remember them verbatim, they were able to give them to Snowden. And I think it probably goes without saying that these guys no longer work for the NSA. But this hack is not a result of highly technical, advanced, persistent threats. It is simply because there was a poor password management policy in place with little or no enforcement and no management. So everybody remembered their passwords and were able to give them to Snowden. So are you at risk? Questions that we normally get our partners to ask their customers are as follows, and most surprisingly, the answer to these questions is, in the majority, no. So we've got some admin accounts inside the data center, but apart from that, I've no idea where the rest of them are. So these guys will not normally have automated processes, so compliance is a hardship and devours resource. They may have scripts and spreadsheets, but nothing like the power of Enterprise Random Password Manager, which is what we're talking about today. Passwords are changed infrequently, as the overhead for resetting these is seen as a significant cost, and it probably is. But if you consider that to continue using vendor-based passwords in a live environment allows a hacker, who probably has an idea of what kit you've got in place, to go to the vendor's website and get the vendor-supplied admin password for your firewall. Once he's done that, he's in. Products that do dictionary attacks are readily available on the net, so your password there can be sort of really worked out very, very easily. So, what's the solution? Lieberman's ERPM manages privileged identity accounts and privileged access. So the first thing we do is discover everything on the network. Everything that has an IP address and everything that has an admin account is discoverable by us. So a wireless access point would be a great example of this. The results can tell us how old the passwords are. We can match the administrators to the systems and who has access to those systems from this scan. One thing to remember here is that Lieberman's ERPM is very fast in auto discovery mode, and if you get the chance maybe to do a POC with a potential customer, then push for a large scale POC. So if the prospect suggests, oh, he's got 500 servers here, ask if they got 5,000, as ERPM will fly. Auto discovery can find around 2,000 devices every minute, so don't be afraid to push for a POC. So, privileged identity management. ERPM can manage these passwords and enforce change upon the device's importance within the infrastructure. So to explain that a little bit further, a firewall's firewall's password can be changed frequently, and a file server may be changed maybe once a month. So we can stipulate the length of the passwords for each type of device. So we might say that a mail server has a 23-character randomized password. We might say that a file server hidden behind internal firewalls may have a 15-character password. So we can actually stipulate the length and complication of each of these passwords as well. So we can set passwords from 8 characters right the way up to 127. And if you imagine these being randomized every instance, so it can even be that I log in to say to the email server, and then once I come out, that password is automatically randomized again. We're starting to build up a very secure picture. ERPM can also change passwords en masse. So imagine if a breach is detected and highlighted with a SIM, such as maybe Logarithm or something in RSA's Envision, we can instantly begin a password change on the key parts of the infrastructure, so protecting your customers' key assets. It is also good to note, I suppose, that all ERPM managed passwords are stored in an encrypted repository. And obviously there is a full audit trail behind all this, which you can hand directly to the auditors. We can manage anything from 10 servers to 150,000 servers, and we have customers out there managing in excess of 500,000 servers. Nothing within the software is proprietary. For example, we use AES encryption as standard, and the product integrates with ticketing systems, reporting systems, SIMs, just about anything you can think of. ERPM also manages admin accounts on all your other security products. So in effect, Lieberman can secure your security. So ERPM controls the life cycle of privileged identities within the infrastructure. And what this actually means is your accounts are always up to date and accurate. The shared credential issue on so-called service accounts is removed. So randomizing passwords every time they're used means that no one can remember them. Sensitive passwords can be changed without fear of outages. So what do I actually mean by that? If you consider service accounts sitting behind a website that may integrate things such as price books, warehousing services, shipping services and the like, and the very nature of these service accounts dictates a sensitive password, then an admin might not want to change these passwords too regularly, because if the authentication failed, then it could be very serious and costly outage. ERPM takes care of this for you by randomizing these passwords in a controlled manner. So a structured change is in place so that there are no outages. So let's have a quick look at the solution overview. This is a breakdown of the components within ERPM, and I don't really want to spend too much time on this, but we've got a web-based server, a database, and we have the application server. Now these components can be installed on one box or on separate devices or even on existing systems. And as mentioned before, we can secure anything from a wireless AP right the way up through to a mainframe. The product is very fast to auto-discover and uses a multi-threaded architecture and can process up to 100 jobs every 6 seconds. This means that POC to implementation can be extremely short, so the sales cycle can be quite short too. I think we've really covered that one. So let's have a quick look at the latest features added to ERPM. We have added application launcher, which means that just about any application can be launched on the endpoint without the user knowing the credentials of the application or the password. So what that really means is I go in through that application launcher. I can go to SAP, for example, or even company LinkedIn site. I don't know my user ID to SAP or the password, so I can't really give that away. We've added session recording capabilities so that we can see the changes that are being made through a playback system. we can integrate this with other session recorders such as Wallix, Observit or Balabit. And applications are easily customized, easily added and customized by each user. So I can put in a request that I want to actually see something else on my my desktop, if you like, on my application launcher, and that can be sort of given to me. So what actually differentiates our solution? So as I've said, it's fast to deploy. We actually did 150 servers within 2 weeks, from 0 to 150,000 servers. Auto discovery is fast, so a POC situation is great. And if you're in that situation, always go for the largest possible estate the customer will let you test and do the POC on. Everything's open standard, so nothing proprietary. So in effect, you could develop on the software using something like PowerShell and make it a little bit more customized for your customer. It's enterprise ready from day one, very, very easy to scale up. So what you get is everything, and a license is applied to everything, depending on what you've actually purchased. All the documentation is fully localized, and support includes full version updates. So how does this solution integrate with exclusive CALM initiative? I hope all of you have heard about the CALM initiative. Basically, it's actually getting vendors to physically work together to produce an actionable intelligence which maybe could deal with breaches, mitigate and remediation against these breaches. So CALM is cyber attack remediation and mitigation. So basically, Lieberman has the technical capability to secure the privileged or admin accounts across your entire estate. That's everything, if you remember, from an access point to a mainframe. So if you consider you've got a SIM, logarithm in this example, acting as core management of your network security, and a breach notification is sent from, let's say, I don't know, a web application firewall, that there is, and the notification says that there is unusual activity that appears to be a SQL injection aimed at one of the databases that the website accesses, you can use Lieberman to immediately change the associated admin passwords on all systems and individuals that have legitimate access to that database. So you've got the problem, you've got the action, you've got the solution, and then you've got the action all rolled up in one. You then update the logarithm system with a notification, and the red alert is actioned immediately. So Enterprise Random Password Manager forms a core part of the CALM initiative, and a little bit of a strapline we're developing here is Lieberman secures your security. A bit one of those I thought up on the fly or on the train or something, I think, probably. So let's take a quick look at privileged access management as opposed to identity management. With regards to the privileged access management capabilities within CALM, imagine, if you will, a large estate has elements of CALM in place whereby the SIM, again, sits in the control center at the center of the network and has feeds into the security on endpoints, on the next generation firewalls, the IPS appliances, the APT technology, and all the rest that you've got in place. All of these security measures are critical to the protection of the business, and IT normally has control of this. However, IT also has a great deal of servers and email servers and whatever to look after as well. And the admin and password association is becoming sort of, well, unwieldy and unmanageable, I suppose is the best way to put it. So by implementing Lieberman, you can immediately make an application launcher just for those IT staff, so that based upon their rights, we can set the system to give them a view and subsequent access of just the systems they administer. So they don't need there to ever see the user ID and password that they use to get into that firewall, into that APT, into that email server. And of course we can randomize these passwords behind the scenes, so that once you've got authenticated to Lieberman, the secure exchange of credentials within your critical security systems can take place. A little bit about Lieberman very quickly. We're coming up to about the 30-minute time, I think, maybe 28, 29. So, Lieberman founded in 1978 and has been an independent software vendor since 1994. Basically, Philip Lieberman, who's still running the company, did a lot of work with Microsoft, used to work for Microsoft, started to build up and design tools around helping Microsoft actually work better, if you like. With over 1,200 customers across the globe, the company has decided to establish itself now across EMEA. And by doing so, making it itself, or trying to become, if you like, a more global company. The company is US owned and is profitable and has several technology partners across several business functions. There, move on. Why won't you move on? There we go. As I said, 1,200 plus enterprise customers. There's some really sort of as quite good names on there, such as Visa, Emerson, Thales, CSC, RSA. So they're using our security, and I think really sort of that you'll see that on most companies' slide deck, but the names are good. So, anybody got any questions? As I said right at the beginning, it'd be good if you could use the chat box at the beginning, but my details are up there. I'm the vendor manager. My number is 07866900405. Email's up there. And Roy Duckles, who's the EMEA channel director, who's currently in, I think, Frankfurt, his details are there as well. Please feel free, any questions you have, to direct directly to us. Oh, I'd like to wrap up now. Thank you very much for attending today. I hope it's been useful. And as I said, any questions, please feel free to ask. Thanks for calling.